Hello and welcome to the 100 Day Art Challenge. This video is number 95 of 100. So we're getting there. There's not many left. There's only 5 after this one. And this is a very messy, loose sketch that I do whilst I'm sat in a little cafe. And I have to finish this off back at home because the food came. It was more efficient than I thought it would be. Now, I love using watercolour, so I'm quite comfortable pulling them out no matter where I am and thinking I'll just do a little sketch, I'll capture something from the day, and it'll be a lot of fun. And I enjoy playing with the colours and doing a double page image in my sketchbooks. I always think that's quite nice to play with. But on this occasion, I just didn't get very much down, and as you can see, this is just little clips of me painting at the moment, because basically the camera is being held in my left hand and I'm trying to pin down the sketchbook with my right hand whilst painting. So it's not an ideal setup. I normally bring something with me. I didn't bring something with me to hold the phone or a camera of any kind to film, so I'm just trying to hold the camera up whilst concentrating on the painting, and it's just not the best way to do an image like this. So it's a little loose and haphazard, but that is something which I tend to do when I'm just in the mood to get an image down. I don't really mind being a little bit sloppy here and there, and that's what the occasion is here. And the reason why it's small clips is because with it being handheld, the camera would just be wobbling around, because you can see how poorly framed it is now. I'm not really looking at how the image is being framed, I'm just holding the camera up, so it's just hovering in the air. And it's funny because the place where we are, the people there noticed that I'm painting, one of the people serving there, the staff, and wanted to see the painting. And this doesn't turn out to be a painting whilst I'm there, it's just a mess that I'm making. You can kind of tell that's bricks I've painted on one side, and you can see these weird shapes, but I could see the woman just looking, thinking, what's he doing? What is this? And you can't really distinguish one thing from the other. And I must confess, by the end, it's not much better, because I do keep it very loose, and not necessarily by choice. It's because I just struggled with this painting a bit, but it reaches a certain point, this painting, when I work on it back at home, that I quite like. There are certain artists out there who make very loose, messy painting, and I really like it. I really like the style of it. Sometimes really clean and almost illustrative work isn't as interesting to me as the really loose and washy type of paintings. I interviewed a guy once called Michael Weller, and his paintings are amazing. I really like them, but they're very loose, they're very abstract, and I think people assume that things like that are quite easy, and I know that they won't be, because it's not easy to make things like that look real or look worthwhile, and I think his work is amazing. So that's the end of the painting that I do on the location. As you can see, I'm back in the studio now. Time for a quick time lapse to run through the completion of this painting. Anyway, back to Michael Weller. So his style is very reduced compared to what I'm doing here, but and what I mean by reduced is that he'll have really basic shapes for still life paintings, but they have so much interesting texture to them and subtle colour difference to differentiate objects, and I'm not anywhere near that ability or skill or what I'm doing here. I'm just basically playing with what I can, and I don't really have much of a plan, and I just stumble into a messy finish which I'm happy to kind of abandon, because it does come to a point where I think I just don't want to do anymore. And it's also, I'm quite happy with the point where it is, but I've made a mess up until this point, so it's been a stressful painting. Even though it's supposed to be just a sketch, I had intentions to make it nicer than this, and I didn't really like it. And then when it hits a certain point, I think I quite like it now, and I want to leave it where I like it, even though it's loose and messy. And even though it's starting off with just watercolour, at some point I just think, you know, I'm going to add to this with, instead of watercolour, I'm going to mix my medium a little bit here, which is not like me. So that white that I've just put on the page there, and from this point onwards, is now gouache. Now gouache is opaque watercolour, that's what it is. So watercolour is transparent, gouache is opaque. So you can't see through gouache. You can water it down so that it's see-through, but when you apply it to the page, it sits on there matte. It's a very flat surface. It's really nice, but I'm trying to use it in a washy, loose, sketchy sense here, and I quite like how it interacts with the painting. I don't think it's how you're supposed to use it, but I don't know how supposed to's really factor into paintings like this, because it is just I don't know, a very impulsive type of memory that I'm conjuring up on the surface. And you can see that things are bleeding into each other. I'm still using bits of watercolour and they're bleeding into other parts, so I'm trying to mop them back and control them. And that's why I need the gouache, to dictate a layer of opacity on top and to just cover up certain things that I've done, so that things are now a little bit more solidified on the surface. So this is gouache here, this kind of maroon colour, and I put in some white whilst it's wet, because I just think I don't want to use gouache as a graphic, flat, illustrative thing. I want it to move and be, you know, a bit more painterly, and so that's why I add a bit of white into there, as well as that I want it to have a certain colour shift in there. And I'm using a bit of both, a bit of acrylic, a bit of gouache, not acrylic, sorry, a bit of watercolour, a bit of gouache, but mostly gouache to try and flatten down things, even if it's washy, like some of this is, because I start to richen up some of the colour on the brick wall there, and I think it looks much better to be brighter. I'm trying to add some details in between the bricks, and I'm enjoying what the gouache is doing, because the colours are quite vibrant, but it's creating a nice balance between the different elements on the page. And I'm trying to get this highlight on the person's face with a bit of white, but it just keeps bleeding in, it just won't dry, which is frustrating, because I just want to get somewhere with this person. And it turns out that even though they're really loose and barely put in there at all, I quite like what's left, what's remaining, and that can sometimes be the case. And then I start noticing these structures outside, which I hadn't noticed earlier on in the painting. I just ignored them and done some buildings outside. So instead I start to do these structures that I see that are kind of greeny blue outside, and then it creates this interesting layered effect where this brown post behind the customer is giving a divide between the interior and the exterior of the building. And yeah, it all starts to come together for me here, because there's enough of the person, there's the layers of the chairs, and then there's the window and the elements outside the window, and this is where it starts to become a stronger painting, and I don't mind it as a sketch, and that's what I wanted to try and achieve anyway. So this is a point where I leave it, and I'm quite happy with how it looks. I know it's really loose, but for a sketch I quite like this loose washy look to this scene. So that's the painting that I did. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.